businesses here. So I think that the legislature is going to need to look at some kind of small business grant program to help them get on their feet, to encourage them to stay here. Just like I did yesterday, I issued an executive order raising unemployment benefits for employees of small businesses that we hope will keep these employees here while small businesses make repairs and begin to get back on their feet again. So my answer to that question is yes, and we would certainly want to work with federal authorities because they got a little deeper pockets than we do.
I was talking with the owners of this brewery. I've been here since 2021. We had Fred. That was a 100-year event 3 years ago. They have experienced a global pandemic, 100-year event. They experienced Fred in 2001, and now they've experienced Helene. We've got to realize, and they sought assistance, including, I believe, paycheck protection. We've got to figure out how we can take all of those disasters and maybe some of the relief that they've gotten, consolidate it, and let them restructure, as one example. It's great to hear the governor talking about state-level relief. I think it's going to be very, very important. Or some of these communities that would only get federal funding, it may not be enough for some of the businesses to come back as strong as we hope that they will. So we've got to work together on it.
Will, go ahead.
Secretary, Senator, Governor, we've heard Mayor Smathers here talk about resilience, climate resilience in particular, coming out of Helene and also Fred. We also heard that conversation with Patty Fornow back in the River Arts District. At each of your levels, which, working with cabinet or working with, federal legislatures, how do you think we can help state and local governing officials build back and foster climate resilience in these areas where maybe you're building more impermeable surfaces? How do you process that challenge?
Well, what I'd say is it's clear that to do right for the 2030s and 40s and 50s, we can't have the same assumptions that led us in the 1950s. I hope and pray that nothing like this is visited upon this community ever again, but the reality is the United States is in for more frequent and extreme weather events. The bipartisan infrastructure package, which, by the way, got bipartisan support from right here in North Carolina, includes the first ever dedicated funding for resilience called Protect. A lot of that goes out through the states. Governor Cooper's administration has already been working with those dollars in order to make sure that we do everything from reinforcing bridges to investing in evacuation routes for hurricanes in places that in the past maybe wouldn't have thought that they needed them. I know that the mayor, the governor, and many local leaders are thinking about that vision, how to make sure they do right by the tradition they've inherited, but recognize that the assumptions and the infrastructure we inherited aren't necessarily going to serve us well for the future. And I know they're paying a lot of attention to this as well. So.
Yeah, William, I tell you that the thing that's that one of the reasons why I have been encouraging Congress to come back and go ahead and vote for funding is that, and ironically, some of the funding right now that are reimbursements that may be delayed in order to refill accounts for immediate needs are ones that are focused on resiliency projects from prior storms. And so we have to realize, we need to be just honest with the American people. We got to walk, chew gum, fund a lot of things at once. That's how we're going to get, I think, to a better position in the future. And the infrastructure impacts that we have here, I-40, which we're going to see shortly, we may need to rethink how we build those back for more resiliency in the future versus just assuming we're pushing dirt back into the existing road beds and putting bridge structures back where they once were if it no longer makes sense and is not in the long-term best interest of the communities.
We're asking the taxpayers to do a lot. We owe it to them to make sure that we rebuild with the most resiliency possible. And we ought to make sure that we are incentivizing resiliency. We've got to stop this nonsense of trying to weaken building codes and understand that we are living in an environment influenced by climate change where these storms are going to be more ferocious and more frequent. We have already seen some of the benefits of the resiliency that we built in from the recovery down east from Matthew and Florence. When Hurricane Debbie came through, a number of those properties got water and we're able to survive because of this resilience that we built into that. So that's got to be a part of this process.
Olivia, this is a question for you, Secretary. Sorry, I'm down here. So many communities have been cut off, and prime examples of that are I-26 and I-40. What's it going to take to build those back, to get North Carolinians and East Tennesseans resources? Those are major pathways for those people.
Well, it's critically important to get those major interstates back up and running. Mayor Smathers was describing just how important I-40 is, for example, to the success of this community. And we're working to make sure that everything from those major interstates to roads and bridges that are only really known to the communities that count on them but are vital there are getting the support they need. Now, with literally hundreds of closures, we know that that's not something that can be done overnight. But we have been working with North Carolina's DOT, with TDOT and others to help make sure we have whatever workarounds and temporary fixes are possible in the immediate term, while providing the support that's going to be needed for the medium to long term to get back to normal, including a normal that might be a little bit different than how that infrastructure looked before this storm hit. That's going to take funding. We've advanced the first $100 million to North Carolina and the first $32 million to Tennessee in emergency transportation funds. That's going to help with those first investments, but we know that the price tag on this is going to be in the billions. And when Congress does come back, we are going to need their help to make sure that we have adequate funds in the emergency relief program at our department.
Thanks, Secretary. Okay, that's all we have time for. Mayor, if you'll show the